Joshua chapter 16 today. So if you've got your Bibles, open up your Bibles, Joshua chapter 16. Only 10 verses, which is fantastic. Last week we had, or 2 weeks ago, because last week we had Israel Warren coming, so a missionary from Alaska. That was really cool. If you guys weren't here, he bought the skin of a wolverine.
He bought it?
He bought it from Alaska.
Oh, I thought he killed it.
No, he did, but he bought it with him.
Oh.
Like, he didn't buy it, like he bought it in his luggage. He traveled with a skin of an animal. I don't know how to say this otherwise. Anyway, he took a picture of it. Here's the thing, it had these claws and everything. It's crazy. So we'll go through the first. We'll go through the verses. 10 verses here. I've only got one section because it's 10 verses. I didn't want to split it up into my usual 3, and then I've got my 3 final points. But we're going to stay in this kind of area for a little while. We've got section 1 right here, which is the Ephraim's and Manasseh's portion. So verses 1 through 10. Again, we're going to say names. Remember what's happened before already? The traveling, the taking over, the conquering of all the cities, everything like that. And now they've conquered, and God's brought them through to the promised land, the land of milk and honey. And this is where they are. Now they're going to start getting their inheritance. Start getting the thing that they're wanting, or that they've kind of been promised. So, verses 1 through 10, I'm going to say some places wrong. I'm going to say some really bad pronunciations. You guys can laugh at me. It's fine. But here we go. And the lot of the children of Joseph fell from Jordan by Jericho unto the water of Jericho on the east, to the wilderness that goeth up from Jericho throughout Mount Bethel. And goeth out from Bethel to Luz, and passeth along unto the borders of Arki to Ataroth, and goeth down westward to the coast of Japhleti, and to the coast of Beth Horon, the Nether, and to the Gezer, and to the goings out thereof at the sea. Something to be said very quickly. Verse 1 talks about Jericho. Brother Scott did a great job going through when they conquered Jericho, about how the walls came down in a certain way, making it this incredibly easy task to do. But what they needed to do beforehand was obey. So just take a look back at some of the previous studies that we've done. Rewatch that video if you want, but it was really good, basically describing why and how it all happened and how kind of God prevailed in that. Verse 4, so the children of Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim took their inheritance, and the border of the children of Ephraim, according to their families, was thus. Even the border of their inheritance on the east side was Ashtaroth Adar, unto Beth Horon the upper, and the border went out toward the sea of Mitha on the north side, and the border went eastward unto Tanath Shiloh, and passed by it on the east to Janohah. And it went down from Janohah to Ataroth and to Narath, and to come to Jericho, and went out at Jordan. The border went out from Tappuah westward unto the river Canaan, and the goings out thereof were at the sea. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Ephraim by their families. And their separate cities for the children of Ephraim were among the inheritance of the children of Manasseh, all the cities with their villages. And verse 10, and they drave not out the Canaanites that dwell in Gezer, and the Canaanites dwell among the Ephraimites until this day, and serve under tribute. That's verse 10 of this one. Chapter 17 goes through Manasseh, basically. I think Reverend Scott's got that on next week. But this is focusing on Ephraim and Manasseh, but Ephraim specifically, okay? So we have this lot that gets divided up basically to these two people. Who are they? Anyone know who Ephraim and Manasseh are? Go for it.
It was some guy's son, Joseph, multicolored blue, right?
Okay, is that your guess or is that your...
That's my answer.
That's your answer.
His son, but he had 2 of them. I don't know.
It is Joseph's sons, that's correct. Good job. Genesis 48:5 tells us, and now thy 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. This is Joseph and all of his sons being blessed, okay? That's that reference back in Genesis 48:5. But really specific, we need to know why they're there, who they are, and also that connects, bless you, all the way back to the time in Egypt when this stuff's being spoken over them. What happened in Egypt? They were beaten, they were slaves, they were broken down people, and their cries went up. They say, God, I don't want to live this way anymore. And what does it say in the Bible? It tells us that God heard their cries. What that tells me is whenever I get into those troubling situations, whenever I feel like, man, I don't know what to do, I should cry out to God. Because if a nation that were being whipped and beaten, put into slavery, used as a human workhorse basically to build all these amazing structures, but still beaten, and they cried out. They got to that point they couldn't take it anymore, and they cried out, and God heard that cry. And what did he do then? Anyone know what happens next? After he hears the cry, who does he send to help them? Go for it. Moses. With who? Because Moses can't speak. Remember, we have that amazing moment where he's like, Moses, you're chosen. You're talking to a bush right now. And you're going to go in there and you're going to help out these guys. And he goes, well, God, I don't speak too good, so I can't do it. Sorry. Who does he send with him?
He sends Aaron.
Aaron, there you go. So you have this team, Moses and Aaron. They go in and they go and speak to Pharaoh. And they ask him over and over and over, let my people go. Let my people go. Pharaoh says no. Pharaoh says no. 8 more times Pharaoh says no. And all these plagues come in. Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and the Egyptians are finally allowed to flee. They come out, but not really fleeing like scared. They are able to walk away, and they're able to take gold and what they need with them from the Egyptians. They're not just blessed with their life; they're blessed with treasure. And then they start leaving, and they walk across, and they're going through the desert. And then the Pharaoh's like, you know what? No, I'm not having this. Let's go get him. Get the army, get the horses, get the chariots, let's go. And they chase after him, and it gets to the sea, and the sea parts open, and they pass through safely, and the chariots chase them afterwards, and boom, they're gone. That's what we're talking about here. This is the connection point from all the way back then, Genesis 48, when they're being promised that they'll be blessed. Joseph's sons will be blessed. And all the way up to here, Joshua. I don't know in your Bible, but that is a significant chunk of pages right there. That's not just like a couple of pages, that's books. That's a timeline, a significant timeline saying that there's a lot of things that have happened since then, but God's promises come true yet again. I think it's really cool to be able to look at that and be like how two people's names can connect you all the way through back to Genesis. Okay? So, a couple of things to think about here, and we're going to really hammer into some extra sections here. But verse 2, it says, goeth out from Bethel to Luz, L-U-Z. So you say Z, but you're wrong.
It's Z.
It's not. But in Genesis 28:19, and Judges 1:23, this city of Bethel, or Bethel, was formerly known as Luz, L-U-Z. It's funny how names change. And it's funny because you can look back and you can see where it was used beforehand to now, and what happened to make that change. And basically, it was a new person in charge. New government, new territories formed, things change, okay? And I think it's really important to remember that a reason why this is important to know about all this land, these territories, is because it gives you the bigger picture. We touched on this 2 weeks ago, keep saying last week, chapter 15, that the reason why we're going through these chapters, and you read Joshua, the action-packed stuff's right at the start. If this was a movie, it would be jump in and it's full throttle, and then the second half of the movie, you're just like, well, this is your house, and well, this is your house, and hey, this is your house, and you're like, this is how it ends? Is there any more battles? Or is it, we get a little bit further and there's some more action there. But this chunk right here, it seems like this would be a boring movie. But for Christians, we need to look at this and realize the reason why this is so important is because every single one of these territories were promised to these people by God. He promised them the promised land. The land flowing with milk and honey. The land that they will be able to rest in. The land that they will be able to worship him in. And it came true. And it's so important to remember that God's promises, even though it is long-winded, even though back in Genesis they were saying, you will be blessed, you'll be looked after, you'll be brought through the Exodus, you'll be brought through the desert, you'll have manna from the sky, you'll have water from rock to drink. All of those things, God's promises came true. if you can believe that and you can trust that, then you are clinging to a foundational truth there, that God does not fail. God does not fail. God does not break his promises. God is not inconsistent. God is 100% truthful. And I appreciate that. I don't know if there's anyone else in my life who I can look at and say, you are 100% truthful. I would love to say that about my wife. I would love to say that about my kids. I would love to say that about me. But I know that I lie every single day. Because I'm a sinner. But God is 100% truthful. Says and does exactly what he says he will do. Okay? It's really important to remember that and cling to that truth. Because the world's not that way. So, let's look here. We're going to look at verse 10 and compare it to a different verse here as well. So verse 10, and they drave not out the Canaanites that dwell in Gaza, and the Canaanites dwell among the Ephraimites until this day and serve under tribute. Who else couldn't drive someone else out? Remember the end of the chapter? You should be on the same page in your Bible. Look at the end of chapter 15. The very last verse 63. What does that say? Go for it.
Jebusites.
Jebusites. Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah and Jerusalem until this day. There is a real problem here where God is saying, here is your inheritance. Here is your home. Here is your land. Be here. Dwell here. Take control of it. Take responsibility for it. And then they get to that point and they go, well, God, we really can't get rid of these guys, so we're just going to let them be. And the children of Judah did that with the Jebusites in chapter 15. And in chapter 16, the Ephraimites are not chasing out the Canaanites. The Canaanites are there. And it says they dwell with them and serve under tribute. Serve under tribute. That means they're there. And they're happy. We're happy to be here. We're not going to cause an uprising. We're not being slaves or anything like that. We're doing it in tribute of who you are. We're just going to work alongside you. That's crazy to me. But God said something. Take the land. Chase them out. It is yours. Take this land. I promised it to you. It's yours. Are they doing what they're told? No. They're missing out on a big blessing here. And their failure to completely drive out the Canaanites is typical of all of the tribes. We're going to read that over and over again. They fail to drive out. They fail to destroy. They fail to complete the mission. Well, what's an incomplete mission? Is that a win or not? Well, it's 97%, Eli. Is that not bad?
It's not 100.
Not 100%. That's exactly it. And if God's saying, do 100%, get it done, them not doing this is not obeying God. This promised land was important because it was promised to them from God. It was an inheritance that they had to work for, but they should have to fight for as well. God had taken them through all of these amazing things, and they just haven't completed it. So, they served under tribute. Basically, they became laborers. Remember before we talked about how certain people got brought into the camp so that they would provide firewood and water for the rest of the people for the whole time? This is the same thing. They're laborers. They're there, but they're there, and they're happy to be alive, so they're there. And maybe this means that the Ephraimites, the people of Ephraim, were guilty of compromise. You know, it'd be really nice to have some slaves. It'd be really nice to not have to do those horrible tasks. It'd be really nice that someone else swept the floor instead of me. It'd be really nice if I didn't have to cook tonight. Oh, slave, come on in. Right? I'm tired from all this battling. We could maybe keep a couple of them around. I don't know. Maybe that's what they thought. But they had these people here now, these laborers around them, and it doesn't justify their disobedience. Just because life was going to be made easier through them being there, it doesn't justify them disobeying God. And that's something to be heard about for our lives as well. Just because this sin makes life easier, just because this thing makes life easier for us, doesn't mean it's okay to disobey what God's asking you to do. Well, I just cheated on one of my tests because I wanted to get it out of the way. Well, I just used ChatGPT to write my whole essay or whatever it is. I'm looking at you, Joshua, come on. But the idea of, I just did this because it makes it easy. That's not obedience. That's disobedience. If you've been asked to do something doing it not in your full strength, not in your full willingness with your whole heart, that tells you that you're unwilling to go the whole way for God. If they had to make the people of Giza forced laborers, they certainly had the power to defeat them as well. If they were able to make them slaves or laborers or whatever you want to call them, they had an opportunity to defeat them. If they were able to get them to the point of saying, you're going to work for us, then they could have easily defeated them. Especially when we look back and realize that Giza was a city that Joshua had already conquered. Okay, look back at Joshua 10:33, and it tells us that this place has already been conquered. It says, then Hiram, king of Giza, came up to help Lachish, and Joshua smote him and his people until he had left him none remaining. There's nothing there. Guys, there's nothing there. The king's dead. The people are wiped out. Joshua's taking care of him. And yet, we'll keep the people who came back and leave them as slaves. That's okay. Okay, fine. Let's think about that for a second. Now let's jump to Joshua 12 as well, about the long list. Remember, Scott went through this. He went through the list of kings who were destroyed. Joshua 12:12 says, the king of Eglon, 1. The king of Giza, 1. It's named. It's written down. It's documented. The king's been killed. The people have been wiped out. And yet, there was a compromise. And it seems innocent, but it became the way that idolatry and immoral worship was brought into the people of Israel. And we're going to eventually go through the book of Judges, and we're going to go through how this immorality and this idol worship changes and makes the people of Israel struggle so much. And it's sad, because all they needed to do was do what God was telling them to do. Get rid of these guys. Get rid of them. But I've already said it in chapter 15 at the end of it. I said, if you don't get rid of the whole sin, if you give it space, if you give it that little bit of space because you think, oh, it's okay if I just do this thing because it's not that big of a deal. No, it comes back and it gets you again. Canaanites, the Jebusites, the people who were clinging in there, that was the foot in the doorway, making sure the door didn't shut the whole way. To idolatry, to immorality, to sin. So this compromise seems innocent, but that was the way that sin got into their lives and into their hearts and changed the nation. So they did not drive out the Canaanites. They did not drive out the Jebusites, but specifically, let's look at the Canaanites. They did not conquer for 2 reasons, really, here. First, they wanted peace. They wanted peace, right? God told them to bring peace across the whole land. You conquer it, and you bring peace. Then it says that you have some slaves, you have some laborers. That's positional. Now you have wealth. You're looked at as a kingdom that has laborers now. That's a big deal. You have people working for you. For the sake of easy living and money, they disobeyed God and fell short of what He had done for them. That's something that we do every single day. We sell ourselves short every single day because we think that's really attractive. That lifestyle is really attractive. The way that person is really attractive. I want to be like that. I want to tell you that's not a good way to live. That's not how God's asked us to live either. Verse 10 as well, we're going to stick there for a second. We're going to talk about the city of Giza. If you look at 1 Kings 9:16, we can read later on that the city of Giza was later conquered by the king of Egypt. And then he gave that city, Giza, to Solomon as a dowry. Does anyone know what a dowry is? D-O-W-R-Y. Dowry, go for it.
It's like a marriage thingy.
Yeah.
It's like, you marry my daughter and you get this.
Right. And what way does it usually go? If someone's giving money or doing something like that, is it you're paying for the wife? Are you paying to marry the wife? What are you doing?
It's more like you're paying to marry the wife. Wait.
Yeah?
In that case, it would be like more of a treaty.
Like a treaty instead? Well, let's look at this. So a dowry, you're correct, is a payment such as property or money paid by the bride's family to the groom of his family, okay? at the time of marriage. We have an example of this that we can see in Genesis 29. Genesis 29, we can read that Jacob paid with work. He worked so that he could marry Rachel. Right? But who did he work for? He didn't work for Rachel. He worked for
His uncle, I think.
The other
It was his cousin? I don't know. It was related.
his father.
It was related to his mom.
Name?
Laban.
Laban. There you go. So Jacob worked. And what did Laban do? I'm going to give you the ugly sister. And then she was like, oh, now I have to work again for another, how many years?
7.
Another 7 years. 14 years work. He got himself 2 wives out of it. There you go. But we can read this also in Joshua, what we've just been going through. Caleb was given Hebron, the city that was frightening because of the giants, right? But think about what's going on. Why did he get given, why did he take that city? Because he offered his daughter in hand, right? And to be married off. And I want you to think about that. Caleb trusted in God. Obviously, Israel did not follow Caleb's example. The Jebusites could not dislodge, the Judahites could not dislodge the Jebusites from Jerusalem. And I think it's really important that we think about what happens here, because when we don't put our faith and trust in God, we allow weakness and doubt to sink in, okay? I want you to think, when you allow your hearts to not be fully cleansed, when you allow sin to stay in your life, when you still act in sinful ways, what you're doing is you're giving it a foothold. What you're doing is allowing it to stay in your life, thinking that it's okay. The Jebusites, the Canaanites in these two situations, chapter 15 and chapter 16, I've already said it, I'm going to keep hammering it. They were the doorway into the nation of Israel being corrupted. Corrupted. Even so, we can read in Hosea 4:17 that it basically says, Ephraim, one of Joseph's sons, has joined to worship the idols. The nation of Ephraim, the people of Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, whatever you want to say, they have fallen to worship idols instead. This person who trusted God, followed God, the dad who led this. And what did Joseph do? Such amazing things. Saved a whole cities, nations from famine by trusting in God. And he had a really cool jacket the whole way through. No. But we need to think about what they did in the past and how it lines up to the future. And when we read through Joshua, we can see how it's lined up and how God's hand has been through the blessing and of all these cities, and then how humans and their humanness mess it up. Think about America. Think about England. Think about anywhere. And you can think, well, you hear it from a grandpa or grandma, and they say, well, back in my day, gas was this much and life was this great, and you never saw this and you never saw that. Well, now look at it. It's all gone downhill. You know, I go back to England and I'll talk to my nan about that, and she'll say, well, the country's a right state. It was better back when. But I can tell you the world was better back when we followed God. When the people of Israel clung to God and trusted Him through the Exodus, through the times in the desert, when His pillar was in front of them, when He was guiding them and leading them and keeping them safe and feeding them and watering them and looking after them. The world was better when we clung to God. The further and further we get away from God, the worse this place gets. And sadly enough, we know that that's what's going to happen. We know that the state of the world is going to get worse. It's not something that we can stop. It's something that the Bible tells us will happen. But what we need to do as Christians is learn to cling close to God and not let those things stay in our hearts. Not let those things stay in the territory that God's given and fought for in our lives. Guys, I have a really funny example for you. It's not funny, but it's just a weird illustration. Every single time I go past the alcohol section in Walmart, I used to drink alcohol a lot. And every single time I go past the alcohol section in Walmart or Winco or wherever I'm shopping, Costco, I get a tempting thing in my head of going, go on. And it would be so easy to just be like, okay, because who's going to stop me? I'm in control. I'm a grown-up. I have an ID that allows me to buy alcohol. There's nothing stopping me from walking in and buying it. except God. And that territory in my heart and in my life that God fought for so hard, saying, get off of this stuff. And he built up his army and he chased out that sin and he defeated that sin. Praise God for that. And I've not drank for like 8 years now. But I tell you, every single time I step in there, there is a temptation. If there is sin in your life, if there's sin present in your life, even the smallest amount, it will try to multiply. It will try to gain ground. It will try and claw its way back to be a big thing. I've not gone back on drinking. I haven't drank it, as I said, for 8 years now. I'm really proud of that, but I'm really thankful for that. Because what that shows me is that God gives me the power, gives me the strength, gives me all the things that I need to be able to do these things. It's not about Jamie. It's about Jesus Christ and what he did on the cross. It's not about my strength. It's about his strength on the cross, taking all the sin and guilt and shame so that I don't have to bear that up anymore. So that I don't have to take all of that in front of God and say, can I come into heaven, please? No, Jesus has already washed that away. The thing that we need to allow is for God to be 100% present in our lives. None of this 97.5, 99.9 stuff. 100%. And that is a tough challenge because the way that the world is wants us to look at different things. Idol worship, immorality, all these different things. Look at you instead of God, keeping a focus on you instead of Jesus, keeping a focus on me instead of what God's done instead. That's the sad truth, and that's the sad state of the world. But this is what the verses 1 through 10 of chapter 16 has showed me. That again, the effect of sin being present in this territory that has been blessed and given by God changed the whole nation. Hosea 4:17 or 18 or whatever, or 17, Ephraim and his whole nation, his tribe, fell to idol worship because they didn't abolish it around them. They didn't get rid of it. They didn't wipe it out. They didn't go through what God told them to do. So, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about there was a victory to be had here. There's a victory to be had. But the issue is they allowed certain things, if this is going to work. Boop. There we go. There was a victory to be had, but doubt crept in. Doubt. James 1:6 says, but let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. How's it going?
Wait, did they go to idol worship right after getting the land?
You will find Judges, like Joshua, the next book is Judges. Struggle city. Okay? And I'm just saying, it's like they do it and then they fall away. And then they beg for a new person to be in charge, and a new person. Well, the other guy was terrible. Get a new guy in. No, the other guy was terrible. And there are so many. Judges is a wild ride, but you just see how desperate the state that humanity gets into when we're just not happy with someone telling us what to do, and we're not getting our way. So I'd encourage you to read Judges. Maybe we should go through that next year, as our big Bible, as our big book kind of study next year, maybe. But I want you to think about this for a second. Just someone who doubts, someone that allows doubt to creep into their mind, we are like a person being thrown around by the waves of the sea. Anyone been on a boat? Small boat, not big one. I want a small boat. No small boats for you, just big one? Okay. Ever been thrown around in the ocean with the waves kind of pushing you around? Everyone been on a kayak before? You get caught by a big wave and you get turned over? That's a whole lot of fun. It's kind of scary, but it's kind of fun.
Wait, do you kayak in the ocean?
100% you can.
Yeah. Why?
Who are you, man? How do you think I got here, Adam? No, but it's like that. He's saying if we doubt, that is like being pushed to and fro like a person standing there in the ocean being thrown around by the wind and the waves. But if we ask in faith, nothing wavering. Nothing. And that's the difference here. They allowed doubt to creep in. They weren't believing in God's promise. They were thinking about themselves instead. They're thinking about what they can gain from all of this. And when you have the victory in front of you, the doubt that creeps in, it changes everything. Certain victory falls to devastating defeat. And not right here, because, they live there. They live there, and they live with these people who live and serve under tribute. It seems like they have a good life. But you skip forward to Judges. You skip forward to a couple of extra books, and you realize the downfall of what happens to these group of people. They allowed the sin to set in. They didn't trust fully. They doubted the promise of God, and they were led to idol worship. They were led to immorality instead. Second point, there was a victory to be had, but there was disbelief. And the funny thing is, doubt could be in yourself. Doubt could be in the person next to you. Doubt could be in your leaders. Disbelief, that's kind of something about God here, okay? Lack of trust that you have of who is in charge truly. And that's God. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we following God? I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think it's going to work out. We shouldn't get rid of them all. We shouldn't do all of this. And then doubt comes in and disbelief creeps in. But having a sure foundation when following Christ is so important. It is the most important thing that we can do. Knowing who he is, knowing what he's done, knowing why he did what he did on the cross, knowing that he did it for every single one of us. Everyone. Not even just those people that believe in him. Not even just those people who say, I follow Jesus. But every single person who turned their back on him as well. Jesus died for them. We cannot, as Christians, have doubt and disbelief in our hearts or in our lives. If we're going to fully follow Jesus, we need to be standing on a firm foundation. That firm foundation is in trust. That firm foundation is faith. That firm foundation is God's word. The firm foundation, the firmest foundation is in our relationship with Jesus Christ. Because that's the funny thing. We can know who God is. I believe in God. There's something out there. People say that, right? Doesn't mean they know him. Well, I've read the Bible, but that doesn't mean you know God. Well, I pray to something, but that doesn't mean you know God. It comes down to your relationship. I can write letters to anyone in the whole world. I will guess their addresses. Hey, this person lives on this street, in this city, in this time, and I'll mail it. Doesn't mean I know the person who I'm writing to. Doesn't mean if I pick up my phone and type in a couple of numbers and say, hello, is anyone there? And they pick up and they say, hello. And I'm like, I don't know who you are, but I can talk to you. Relationship makes that legit. That's the big deal here. Your relationship with Jesus Christ is everything. Everything. Otherwise, this is just a fantastic storybook that has stood the test of time. The most trustworthy storybook in the whole world. And then you're saying words to something that doesn't matter if you don't have a relationship in Jesus Christ. Doubt, disbelief, they cannot have a place in your heart or in your relationship, okay? Final one here. There was a victory to be had, but there was no follow-through. We talked about this in a couple of weeks back when I said, are you a person who says what you're going to do, or are you a person who does what they're going to do? Are you a doer or are you a sayer? Do you talk a big talk and then not actually follow through, or do you do what you say you're going to do? Because God's put this promise ahead. He's told them to chase out, to conquer, to take over, to make this your home. All the way back in Egypt, when they were crying out, the crack of the whips, God made that promise. I will deliver you to the promised land. And God came through on his side. But these guys did not come through on theirs. To doubt and to disbelieve and then not to follow through was quite simply the final nail in the situation, right? God done all these incredible things. The amazing journey through Exodus. All the cities they conquered, all the battles they fought, all the ways that God showed up time and time and time and time and time again. And yet there it is. I'm going to doubt. I'm going to have a little bit of disbelief here. And then I'm not going to actually follow through with what you've asked me to do. God brought them through the toughest of times. All they needed to do was that final step. Because the kings were already conquered. The land was already claimed for them. It had their names written on the land title. All they had to do was move in their couch and fridge and it was theirs, right? God had already paid the price. That land was theirs. But they didn't follow through. Guys, when God asks you to do something, you got to trust. You got to have faith that it is the right thing for you to be doing. And that's why God's asking you to do it. Well, how do I know if God's telling me to do something or not? I'm glad you asked that question, guys. Sometimes God will point you in a direction that seems very strange. I didn't ever really want to come to America. I'll be honest with you. It wasn't on my plan. My plan was not to marry an American. My plan was not to go to a theology university. My plan was never to move to America. My plan was not America. But the point is, when God tells you to do something, it can be a complete curve. And that's not why you know it's from God, because sometimes that can just be very confusing. But there's got to be something to be said. There's a trust in who is asking you to do the thing that you're doing. I trust that God has the best for me, and that is why I'm here. I trust that God handpicked Rachel to be my wife, and that's why I married her. I trust that God has got my family, and He's going to look after them whatever way that looks like. I trust God. That's why I followed what He was asking me to do. And it can be a feeling, or it can be a calming, or it can be an emotional pull. But the thing we need to do is be able to put God right in the middle of all of that and say, is this what you want me to do? God asks you to do it. God turns around and says, go for it. Green light. Follow through. Do what God's asking you to do. Last week, Israel Warren came and he spoke to us about moving to Alaska. Dude was from Florida. And he moved to Alaska. He went from like nice and warm and swampy, crocodiles and all the other stuff there, to polar bears. And so much snow, it's ridiculous. He was like, why would God do that? And he said, I don't know, but God called me there, and He's doing incredible things there. God does these amazing things. God pulls us out of slavery and puts us into a place of milk and honey. But the thing is, we need to walk. We need to be there. We need to follow through on what He's asking us to do. Okay? We are not the Israelites. We are us now. In America, what does that look like? What does that look like for here? If we all started following God and saying yes to what He has planned, what does that look like? How would it change our community? How would it change this church? How would it change the Pacific Northwest? How would it change America? People actually started listening and saying yes to what God had for us, instead of doubting and sowing disbelief and going for what I want to do instead of what He wants to do. A couple of challenging thoughts for you. But that was Joshua chapter 16. I hope that was kind of helpful for you guys, and even just looking at that final verse and what the effects of allowing sin to stay in your life does to you, does to your family, does to your nation, does to the people that you love. Get rid of that sin. Give it to God. Allow God to take care of every single inch of it. Because we need Him. We can't do this on our own. Okay? In His power, not in ours. Okay?